My name's Chris. I'm the Campus and Community Engagement Librarian at Northwestern University Library. I'm also a member of the ACRL ULS Academic Outreach Committee that hosts these roundtables. Today's topic is planning and managing outreach events throughout the year. So before we get started, why don't we introduce ourselves all around the room. I'm going to go in the order that people arrived. So why don't you let us know who you are, where you hail from, and what your title is. So Danielle?
Hi. Yes, I am Danielle Gunkel. I work at Indiana University as the Public Services and Outreach Manager for our Business and Public and Environmental Affairs branch library. I've only been here about 6 weeks, so I'm actually really new to this, and even this outreach part of this position is new. So I'm hopeful that I'll learn a lot, but I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to contribute today. So yeah, that's me.
Everybody always has ideas to share. Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Mastel. I'm also on this committee and kind of lurking as I'll be a facilitator tomorrow. But I do outreach and instruction on the St. Paul part of our campus. So that's a little about me.
Great. And feel free to jump in as we go. Stephanie?
Who doesn't know how to unmute her microphone? I'm Stephanie Race. I'm the head of research and outreach at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. I'm also a member of the committee, and I signed up for this because I wasn't facilitating a session, but now I'm facilitating a session. So this is going to help me with my discussion on Thursday because I wasn't prepared. And I'm actually really excited about our topic because we are just starting to plan for next year, and we have realigned. We have a student outreach person, a first-year outreach person, and a faculty outreach person, and we have just decided to not work separately, but to actually work together.
That's a crazy idea. Why would you do such a thing?
Crazy. So we're going to work together, and I'm kind of excited to see what other people do, because I think we're doing it the hard way.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Barb?
Hi, I'm Barb Eschbach. I'm the head librarian at Penn State York, which is a small commuter campus of Penn State. And we do a lot of programming in the library, just as a way to engage students on a commuter campus and to get them into the library.
Great. So the first question is, how do you coordinate the various outreach activities going on in your library? What obstacles do you encounter? And maybe like what tools or software do you use to help you manage your academic calendar and your outreach events?
Well, this is Barb. I don't know of any software that would help me. And it's kind of, at our campuses, in our library, it's kind of just up to me to decide things. Then I meet with the staff and I present them some of the ideas that I have, get their input. What I did in previous years was did it early enough so that I could get it printed in the student handbook that they give out. This is the first year they're not going to print one. So now I have to think of another way to get the information out to students. So I think what I'll do is give them a handout during the orientation so that they can see the fall activities that we have planned, kind of have a rough idea for the spring, but sometimes I hate to commit myself to something that early. Yeah. So right now I'm just planning for 6 activities for the fall.
Are they not doing one at all, or are they going to do a digital one?
Well, they're not going to do one at all in terms of the print one. And I'm trying to think what they did tell me, how they're going to get information out to students. I think they'll just have some other online, hopefully not through their email because they don't read their email. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do. This is the first time that they've taken this approach.
Anybody else?
So here at UNF, in the past, I've coordinated faculty events which have been very minimal. And then we have a pretty robust student outreach program, and that's been coordinated with the student outreach committee. But what I just realized is that the student outreach person decided what they were going to do and then told the committee, which is not exactly how I thought it worked. So we plan events. We have a pretty set schedule of things that we do. And I think what we tend to find that we run into is because we were planning separately, then making sure we weren't overlapping got more complicated. So I literally today, we just started merging our calendars of events together, which that alone I think is going to help us. But Barb, one of the things we do here, we don't have a printed calendar. We do have a campus calendar of events that's online, and we add as many of our events as possible to that calendar because it feeds into a number of other things. And then we also have an update that goes to students via their email, and it's also available online. So that maybe you have something like that you could try.
Well, that's a good point. I checked my email in the meantime to see what our student affairs director had let me know about not having the printed calendar. And he did say they'll post all their student affair events to the calendar, which is online, what you're talking about. I just never was aware if students really use that, but maybe now they'll promote it more so that they see it. And then we have a new person in that department who is going to be exploring an online version of the student handbook. So if that comes to fruition, I think that would be helpful. The calendar that's online isn't a really user-friendly, attractive calendar, so I just never even thought of students using that. So hopefully they'll find something that they can promote and that will really be used.
Yeah, our calendar actually feeds into a daily update that shows up on the software that our students log into, which when I finally figured that out, realized the ugly calendar is worth its weight in gold because it feeds to that thing they see every time they log into the system. So we have, so maybe something like that happens with yours that you might check into.
So you mean when they log into a course management system or just on?
It's something similar to that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's
we all
good to
do.
know.
Yeah, when I figured that part out, I was like, oh, we want everything on that calendar. I'm curious, does anybody use any software? Like, I have a friend who uses Asana for project management. Anybody uses something like that? Because we've had a couple big events where I really felt like we needed a way to know who was doing what parts of them, but we haven't decided.
I know of a few. A lot of people use Slack, which I believe is free. We use Trello for event project management, which is also free and pretty easy to use. It works as a kind of like you have a series of lists, and each list has like cards on it. And you can add all different types of information to cards, be it images, and you can tag people or assign people individual cards if that's like a task. It's a pretty flexible tool depending on how you want to use it. You can also include deadlines and things like that for particular cards.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a moment real quick to welcome Stephanie. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear us fine? I think I could hear you for a second. Maybe not. If you can hear us and we can't hear you, you can also type into the chat section, and we can make sure that we keep you included in the conversation. As far as technical difficulties, no worries. Usually you can fix those up in there's the cog up here. and then figure out, it might be trying to find your microphone or something like that. I see you. Another thing that I find actually incredibly useful when we look at our calendar throughout the year and planning events, just within the library, is super old school. I order every year a large 24 by 36 dry erase calendar that I put on my wall. And whenever something, I mark down like when all of the reading weeks and finals weeks are and what our regular tentpole events throughout the year are. So I know when these things that are going to be coming up are throughout the year. And I can just like turn around and look when somebody says, hey, we want to do this. And I go, well, that actually is right before this other event that we have going on. So that's probably a bad time to do it. I keep all these things in my Outlook calendar as well, but it's kind of amazing how much more useful old school technology can be, because I don't have to like scan through my calendar to figure out where things are. I can actually just kind of look at it and see the whole year at a glance, which can be pretty handy.
I love that you're using the old school, because I proposed that with a little pushback when I first got here, and I wanted to re-propose it. now that we're merging everything together, I think it's just going to get more complicated for us.
Yeah.
In a previous life, I used one of those and loved it.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just strictly for me. It's in my space.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how well it would work as like a shared calendar. It's an interesting idea. I guess it would all depend on where it's hosted and whatnot.
It could live in my office.
There you go.
And I think Trello is similar to Asana. Actually, the person I know who's using Asana tried both of them. So it's interesting that you're using Trello. And do you like it? Do the folks you work with like it?
I do like it. It works for our office quite well.
Okay. Thank you.
Stephanie, I'm going to also let you know that I saw you talking, but I couldn't hear you. So we're still having microphones. Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes. Welcome to the conversation.
Sorry.
No worries. Glad to have you. So do you want to let us know a bit about who you are, where you are, and then maybe how you coordinate outreach activities throughout the year?
Sure. So I'm at Texas A&M University. So we're pretty big. I think we're now ranked as the 5th largest university in the country, 4th. It depends on, we just keep growing. So it just depends on what day you look at student enrollment. So it's difficult because we have a lot of kind of campus location libraries as well, and branch libraries. And so we just kind of, I like to call it loosely coupled chaos. Try and coordinate as best we can. And we've been really helped. I've been following, whether you guys use project management or whatever, we've been really helped in the last couple of years because we're now a Google Apps for Education campus. So we're using Google to its maximum advantage. So Google Calendars, Google Docs to share with people and arrange things, and that's been helpful. We do have a project management software that's licensed by the university called TeamWorks. But the learning curve is so high that when I have, a subject librarian that's maybe involved in 1 or 2 events throughout the year, it's too hard to onboard them onto TeamWorks then, where Google is just, we keep that technical learning curve low so that they can focus on the learning outcomes for the event. And a lot of meetings. Just a lot of meetings.
There is that. The other, thinking about obstacles, I think the big obstacle that comes through often is, as I was saying, events that kind of run up against each other throughout the year.
Yeah. And on a campus of our size, that happens all the time. So for instance, we do a big open house event the week before classes start, and that's a big campus push for campus events during that week. And we get kind of a preferential spot. We're called a signature event. So nothing else is supposed to happen around us. But, we draw anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 students in 2 hours. But it really hasn't stopped, Department X, the chemistry department decides they're going to host a barbecue during that time. They do it anyway, right? We can't really stop them. But it does give us a little bit of leeway to work within the structures of the campus events to not conflict with other things. It helps.
How do you accommodate new outreach requests from campus partners or new opportunities that come up throughout the year? So like how flexible is your annual semester plan, if you have a plan?
We rarely say no. So we try and make it work. We have student workers and we try and engage them as much as we can. We have our standard events, you know, that are on our calendar, our Google Calendar that we are always at. But then when something else comes up, we put out an APB if we need volunteers to staff it, or we send our student workers. We just kind of make it work.
I completely agree with, we try very hard not to say no. That's been something I've really pushed. We have various views on this kind of thing. I try very hard not to say no. If somebody wants us to be there, I want us to be there. I agree with that. Sometimes staffing is hard, and we've got a really nice cadre of students who can help us at things. And I am very fortunate. We have a really great staff who likes to do things. So it helps when we get busy. We've also worked our way into being in the forefront of people's minds when they start to schedule that week of welcome, those first week kind of activities. So we do get contacted about, what are you planning? What day do you want? And they try really hard to make sure that we don't do the event like you do, though I'm really always jealous every time I see pictures of what y'all do, Stephanie. But it is nice to have a calendar and be able to say, okay, we don't want to be on the same day as this because we don't want to compete with them. And
Right.
our enrollment services they try hard with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, same goes for here at the University of Minnesota, because we're so big, like Texas A&M, and there's so many like little libraries that do their own thing, but a lot of it comes back to like what kind of support is needed. If a campus partner is asking us to participate, yeah, we do everything we can. But if it's kind of staff ideas kind of bubbling up, it does kind of come often to coordinators like me or some other folks that are spread across campus, and a lot of it comes down to like, do we need to get our marketing and communication folks involved? And they're like planned out for a semester/year in advance. So it all kind of, what level of outreach are we talking about, and what are the goals, and who's the audience? So it's tricky. We're not as nimble as I wish we were.
We try and have we have a swag closet with, you know, brochures, pens, cups, pencils, things that we can give out at events. So we try and keep enough in our closet. We've built an inventory system. Again, it's in Google, so that we kind of can react nimbly on the fly. We need 200 of these. Well, we've got 200 in inventory. And then the Google inventory spreadsheet, once we take things out, we indicate that, and then it turns color and tells us when to reorder. So that's been super helpful, because then we can kind of track what we're sending to what audience and how many, so that we don't overlap, but also then indicates to us on the fly, you know, we've reached our threshold. We know it takes 2 weeks to order, you know, another 500 of these brochures, and we've reached the threshold of 500. We need to reorder this week, so that we always have constant stock at our fingers to act nimbly.
That's a lot of counting. I can't even
That's
imagine.
what my student workers are for.
Anybody else? How you tackle being nimble throughout the year? Barb?
Well, it's kind of easier since we're so small. There's always multiple things going on many times, but the programming in the library is sort of unique, because it's not like the student activities events, and it's not like some of the faculty colloquiums. So there are times when a staff or faculty member wants to do something, and this seems to be the best venue for them to do it. So, for example, we have our campus instructional designer, who for the past several years has been conducting sessions with faculty and staff over the lunch hour about mindfulness. And we've explored all kinds of different things. And she approached me a few weeks ago and said, you know, it would be nice to do this with students. So the programming I do is all based on 5 literacies, which is an initiative of the Pennsylvania Library Association, and it's called PA Forward. And the literacies are basic literacy, health literacy, civic and social literacy, financial literacy, and information literacy. And what's kind of nice is people assume that the library is just information literacy and nothing else. So this mindfulness session, which we'll present in the library, is a health literacy initiative. And coincidentally, the Library Association next week is holding a webinar about mindfulness in the academic library. So we're going to watch that together, see if we can get some more ideas for this. So I think we've done programming enough that faculty will reach out to us if they want to do something, but it doesn't seem to fit into the other categories on campus. And again, I don't think we've ever really said no to anybody.
I have a question,
yeah.
if I can. One of the things that we find is that we frequently get asked to host things because of our space. Like, people want to partner with us, but what they really want is to use our space. And I'm wondering how you handle those kind of requests, and how you, if any of you have had luck turning them into real partnerships. Because to me, giving you a room is not a partnership.
Yeah. We have that problem too. You're not alone.
Yeah, we actually have requirements, like if folks want to use our instruction spaces or one of our meeting rooms, at least in St. Paul that's larger, that there has to be some sort of library component piece to it. But again, that's a little more difficult. Otherwise, the biggest partnerships we had are around like artwork and gallery kind of spaces, and cooperating with different departments or student groups or folks that way.
I actually, I don't know that I feel differently. I generally don't have much of an issue if people want to use the space. Like, one of the things that we do kind of often is, I mean, a lot of the partnerships we have revolve heavily around the idea of cross promotion. And because working with all of these different departments on campus that don't have the same kind of visibility that the library does, because being a heart of campus and student activity, one of the values we can offer to them is that space for them to, we do tabling events for them so that they can come through, that they, so that like, whether it's, you know, health and wellness, can do a tabling event. CAPS does things, counseling and psychological services, CARE, which I can't remember what CARE stands for. You know, these different partners, they do events and activities in the library. And no, we're not promoting ourselves, but also when they, by the partnership that we have and the relationship that we have with those departments, when they're talking to students, they can promote what we do to help them in those moments. So when a student that's working with CAPS is talking about how stressed they are, they have to write this paper, things like that, our relationship with CAPS allows them to remember what we do, so that when they're talking to that student, they can help that student realize, well, maybe you need to talk to a librarian to help you work on this paper, to help you find you're feeling stressed out. You know, if you sit down with somebody for half an hour, you know, you'll find you'll actually feel a lot better and a lot more confident about what you're doing. So although the immediate payback isn't exactly, you know, what, you know, you might want with like direct interaction with a student, I still think there's a lot of value to it, for my money. And what do we lose? We don't really lose anything except for raising our own profile with our partners on campus as a great partner. And that's been kind of how our experience has been.
I love that concept. I wonder if you can talk about whether you're feeling a tension between that kind of outreach programming and your instruction program. And so we have really limited space, and I always had this tension because I also coordinate the instruction program about use of space for partners or events versus I got to save that space in case someone has an information literacy class and they need to use that multi-purpose space or that classroom space. So it's a really hard tension for me sometimes.
Yes. So classroom space is something that is at a premium in our library for sure. We actually only have, I would say, 2 full, hands-on classrooms, which are actually right next to each other that we control throughout the calendar year, and they each seat about 20 students. So if you have a big class, you actually need both of them. And then we do have some other rooms as well. And for something like what CAPS does, they actually use this room that I'm in right now, which is off of our information commons. So they essentially are using like a small private office that we use only for research consultations.
Okay.
And I schedule that. It's once a week for 2 hours. And they have it throughout the year. And it's not a big impact on our space needs from the library's perspective. Other things tend to also fall, I like to find flexible ways. So when I meet with a partner, I say, well, what do you want to do and what do you want to get out of it? So if they're doing like a tabling event, obviously they don't need a classroom. Most people actually don't come to us to do like classes and events. That's sort of like big group sessions because we don't have the facilities to offer that. That's something I want to fix because I've actually run into some problems where, or what I see as problems where like during what's called Money Matters Week. I don't know if other campuses also do Money Matters Week. I think it's in March, where Associated Student Government and Student Enrichment Services look at exploring the issues around how costly it is to be a student and some of the struggles that they have. So they were doing some programming and I wanted them to do some of the programming in the library, and they just didn't find the library was quite an adequate venue for that to happen, which I see as something that we need to work on, because that's exactly the sort of thing I think belongs, that's a conversation that belongs in the library for the library to be part of, as opposed to in the student union or even some of the other buildings that aren't accessible in the same, I would say socially accessible in the same ways that the library and the student union are. You know, if you hold that in one of the engineering buildings, you know, how are the arts and social sciences students going to feel about going in there? They don't know that they're actually welcome in there the way they do here. So it is a struggle. And to me, I think it's about working with your partners, knowing what the expectations of your library are. We do schedule everything around our instruction. Our instructors have first dibs on everything. And sometimes it's also about talking to our coordinators to figure out, hey, can we move this to here, or something like that. Angie, can you hear us? If you can't hear us, just let us know in the chat so we can keep you included in the conversation.
I think it's interesting, Chris, your point about space. We did a watch party last year during the the presidential debates, which turned into a popcorn and politics discussion that political science had been hosting in their building and had about 6 people show up. We averaged 30 when we moved it to the library, and they're thrilled because they're getting a mix of people. And so I think that's an interesting point, and we literally just do it kind of in the middle of the room. It's a very strange open thing we're doing, but it's been really well received and will continue because the students have enjoyed it so much. But
yeah, I think that's a great idea. That was actually one of the things that we kind of started focusing on, was thinking about the library spaces in a much more flexible way. Starting to do more events in much more public spaces, because it increases participation, because students that walk by and see it are more apt to actually come and join the conversation or take part in the event that they didn't even know was going to happen. They don't have to find a room. They walk by the room and they see, oh, because one of the things I find is that no matter how much marketing you do for events and activities, people don't look at flyers, they don't look at signs, but if they stumble across it, they might walk over. So you get a lot more participation.
Yeah, we do better with handwritten whiteboard signs than we do with beautiful posters that somebody spent hours making.
Wow.
And how frustrating is that, right?
Yes. We've actually, for some events, just stopped making signs.
I wanted to tie into Barb's conversation the notion of basic information literacy outreach in your outreach goals, and how you scaffold your outreach activities. Does anybody else look at that? Where is basic just interaction fall? Where does learning about information literacy, learning about just library services, learning about how to be a healthy human being student that isn't going to go absolutely mad? How do you handle these things in your calendar?
So we've started to use curriculum mapping techniques to do this. And we've just started with our first year program, because that in and of itself on a curriculum map is a spreadsheet that won't even fit on an 11 by 17 piece of paper. So we've mapped all of the places where we're seeing students as they're entering the university, either in an outreach event or in a class event. And then we map those to student learning outcomes, and then we have what we call OLOs, outreach learning outcomes, because some of our student learning outcomes that are information literacy based don't work well for outreach events. Kind of those service awareness ones, or reduction of library anxiety kind of thing. They're really better for an outreach learning outcome. And then we map that on kind of 3 levels. Are we introducing, are we reinforcing a concept or an outcome, or are we advancing those outcomes? And then we also track who we're seeing. So are they first generation students? Are they students of color? Are they traditional students? Are they, and so that way we're getting a good sense of where we have overlap in our populations, and then what kind of points we're hitting in all of those various places. And so we're just in the kind of infancy stages of getting that map together. Then after staring at it for a while, going, who are we not reaching? Where are we sending the same message twice? And then trying to figure out a plan for moving that forward.
That sounds really exceptional, actually. If you are willing to share those documents with us, or samples, templates, I think we'd all love to see those. I know I would.
We just presented this at LOX. We just got back, and so we have it all kind of packaged up nicely. I can share.
Thanks.
That is really impressive. So those outreach learning outcomes, is that something you guys came up with? Mm-hmm. And the idea of the introducing, reinforcing, and advancing? And then how do you know who's coming to your event in terms of the categories that you're putting them in?
Oh, so a lot of times we get that from our strategic partners, right? So we know, for instance, the incoming freshmen go to something they call Fish Camp, which is literally 4 days in the middle of the Texas woods, where they drink Kool-Aid. There is Kool-Aid, it is blue. And they introduce them to life on campus and the traditions and the war hymn song and all of that good stuff. And we go out and do a library presentation as a part of that. Well, we know, because they've been tracking it for the 60 years that they're doing it, that only 70% of freshmen, roughly, participate every year, and that our students of color aren't going. That they have a separate orientation on campus that they either call Excel, which is for students of color, and they go to that, or they have something called Focus, which is for first generation students, and that's where those students are. So we're just getting that from our partners. And so we kind of know then, right, if we're gonna hit the primarily traditional, straight out of high school students, we're gonna go here. If we need to hit our students of color, we need to go here. And so we're just getting that as much information as we can from our partners.
Anybody else have strategies for how you scaffold or approach your calendar? How about, Stephanie, you mentioned this too, like making sure that you're reaching all of your people throughout your events throughout the year. How do other people make sure that you're reaching your freshmen, that you're reaching, you know, your grad students, or, you know, whatever your pointed constituents are?
We don't have a concerted effort in that, though we have recently started tracking who is attending, so we have a better sense of who is not. One of the things I'm shooting for is more events outside the building in places where we know students aren't coming. We installed turnstiles, I guess a year and a half ago, that allow us to track down to the nitty-gritty what departments are using the building, which then I can figure out who's not. And so I'm shooting for more of those outside the building to let people know what we'll do. Because it's always, the students who come in the building don't even know what services we offer. And so those who aren't coming know nothing.
That is the struggle. Barb, we're talking about how we make sure that we're reaching all the constituents that we want to reach. Like, how do you know that you're hitting your freshmen, you're hitting your grad students if you have them, if you're hitting, you know, whatever your levels are that you want to target?
I think what's difficult here is I can't email the student body as a whole, but then I wonder too if they're even going to read their email. So we put things out on our Facebook page. And the first year I did all these events, it was billed as a first year experience. So we were able to get a list of all the first year students and communicate with them and present things at their orientation. But then all the events we had were open to everyone on the campus too. So it really helped, I think, for us to target those first year students, because then they could talk about it with other people, and we ended up having a core group of people who would come. And I think I'd like to continue doing that, because once the events as a first year student and realize that they can come back next year, I think it's going to build the participation that way.
So what about staffing? How do you coordinate volunteers to work all these events throughout the year? And how do you avoid volunteer burnout?
Well, I think because we're so small, we can do it with not many people. Sometimes, you know, we might only get 20 people at an event because we hold them in the library in a kind of public space. And a lot of them I can do by myself, or I have the other librarian help me. So I don't feel like we've gotten to a point where we've had too much that we could handle. I think the first year when we offered a lot of events, it was, I think I got burned out. But I feel like I was doing most of the work, so I don't really feel like it impacted a lot of other people. Now I've tried to have other people come up with ideas, because I feel like they'll be more invested in it if they come up with the ideas. But I think we're just small enough that, and we try not to overwhelm ourselves with too many things.
So one of the things I think we're really, I'm really trying to change the narrative in our university. rather than the unit that I run, which is called Learning and Outreach. People, other librarians or staff in the libraries, because again, we're quite large, talking about volunteering to help out our unit to run these events. We're trying to change the narrative where everybody is responsible for outreach, and they're not volunteering, they're participating. And so it's part of their job too, because it's really easy for people to feel like they're doing us a favor, and if they have something else going on, to kind of put off outreach, right, for their quote unquote real job. The outreach is this other thing. So that's been a hard kind of cultural transition, but something I'm working very strongly at, because at our size and scale, we can't do it if we just have quote unquote volunteers. Because like I talked earlier about our open house event, it takes 180 people to pull off. So if the whole ship isn't on deck, you know, we're dead in the water.
I like this idea because that's something I certainly struggle with here at Northwestern. And I like the message of, participating. How do you change the cultural mindset that this is something that we're hoping or expecting you to participate in? How have you sent that message through the organization for people to understand the change in perspective?
So I think people respond directly to measures of assessment. So a lot of that has been talking with our library administration about two measures. One is yearly evaluations. The other one is promotion and tenure, because we are faculty here. So when people put in their evaluations, they're always asking the questions of, where does this thing that I'm doing count? Is it librarianship? Is it service? Is it research? So changing that narrative to, I participated in the library open house, that it's not service, it's librarianship. Because librarianship equates, quote unquote, your job, right? And so there is a load leveling. There's this conversation about how much you do compared to whatever, but it's librarianship. It's not service. It's not, you aren't doing somebody a favor. It's part of what everyone should and could be doing. That's an easier conversation to have with like subject librarians than it is with, say, library catalogers, where they don't necessarily see the direct correlation.
How do you get catalogers and tech services folks to participate?
I'm embarrassed to say it, but we're really well resourced, and we get a lot of funding from like our friends group and from other ways. So I feed them, I bribe them with free food to come. If you come work this event, I'll feed you pizza. I buy them t-shirts. If you work this event, you get this t-shirt, because we want to be able to identify you in the sea of students. I clearly tie everything that they're doing back to that evaluative measure. So if you do this, this is how you can talk about it in your eval. So I try and incentivize.
What about staff?
Staff is a harder sell. So staff, I kind of have to incentivize it with the food and the t-shirts, but that's a harder sell with the eval.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have, it's a state system, so staff are measured by certain metrics. So one of the metrics is teamwork and collaboration, broadly defined. So I can say, if you come participate in this, you can add this to your eval under teamwork and participation. Or teamwork and collaboration, I think is what it's called.
One of the tools, it's a simple tool that I use, is recognition. Whenever I do any event that requires a number of people to spend some time making sure it's successful, I send out an email to the entire staff, thanking people, and I list every single person that volunteered for that, to work that event, and highlight the role that they played in, making it happen. Because I just think I think it's important to make sure that people are recognized for the time they take to do these things. And I think it also helps them recognize the value of these activities. And I think that certainly helps them say, well, they recognize that it's appreciated. So the next time I do a call, they're as apt to join in.
I definitely, we have a crew that always volunteers to help, and I love your idea of participate and I am going to change my vocabulary because we do have a crew that always participates. And then we have some folks who will participate in certain events. They have their favorite events. And then we have our 99% of our tech services staff and faculty don't ever help, which makes it's a real load when you're covering service points and those same people are also covering large outreach events. I like the idea of participation. And one of the things I have found is it depends on who is the lead on a project, what kind of volunteers we get. And so I'm working some on that in terms of your approach to it impacts who's going to step up to help you.
I think that's really true. So some of our large outreach events, instead of trying to coordinate it all myself, or one of my staff trying to coordinate it all themselves, we talk about their project facilitator, and then they identify leaders from each of the units in the library, and then those leaders need to, facilitate their small subtask or subfunction, and that helps bring more people in too.
Yeah, we do something similar for like our large scale events. We have an engagement team of 3 people, and each large scale event, one of the engagement team is the lead for that event, but we bring together a team from all around the library. But many of them are volunteer. We do a call for who wants to help coordinate. And so we bring those people in to then help plan the event. So then each year it can be a little different. Sometimes they're very different, like our outreach, our fall orientation, which happens in the second week, is different every single year. We have the same kind of similar goals year to year, but the event itself is completely different every year. And by reaching out and building a new team every year that has like a coordinator that kind of like has that institutional knowledge, it helps us expand our participation pool. And yeah, I'm going to start changing my language because we've often struggled with this notion of when we do a call for volunteers, it's like they're giving something, and they shouldn't feel like they're giving something. They should feel like they are working this and that they're as much a part of it. And also that their supervisors understand that this is work time for them. Mm-hmm. That it's not something that they're giving up on their own.
Right. They need to be able to take ownership of it, both intrinsically and extrinsically as well.
I'd also say to Stephanie, Florida Stephanie, to your point, that one of the things that we find is that a lot of these events, our technical services staff, or a number of our technical services staff, really look forward to them because it's the one couple times out of the year that they actually get to interact with people and students and see that there is like a person that connects with the work that they do behind the scenes, mm-hmm. right? That they have that opportunity to make that connection and interact with those people. A lot of people actually really look forward to it.
Well, and that's kind of surprising to me because that's what I thought was, here's this opportunity to go hand out food at a party. Like you don't even have to, because somebody did tell me early on, well, I don't know enough about how this works to help. And I'm like, anybody can hand out a piece of pizza and smile and just enjoy the students, because I do feel like they don't get to see the students and how much the students do benefit from what they do.
So I heard the same thing. Florida Stephanie, right?
Yes.
I heard the same thing. So I asked them, what would make you more comfortable participating in these outreach events? And I think because we're so big and we have so many kind of branch libraries, they said, I'm comfortable talking about my own unit and what my unit does, but I'm uncomfortable talking about the university library services kind of writ large. So we did a series this past year. We called it Outreach Round Robins, and it was an internal function where we invited people. Each unit provided them a list of questions. Like, there were common questions like, what's the coolest thing in your library, or, you know, what's the oldest book, those kinds of things, just generic. And then we provided them to those people, and then we took turns going to each unit or location and learning about our own library. And then we posted those questions and those FAQs up in our intranet so that people could feel more comfortable talking about the organization holistically. And then those are up there and they can review them before they go to an outreach event if they want to.
Yeah, we have started offering training before we do events. So
Yeah,
if you
that's
want to help, but you're uncomfortable, we'll do a training session. We picked up some new people, but they were actually new to the library, people who work in public services. But we did pick up some new people to help with our orientations in the summer, which has been great.
That's
But
great.
I like the idea of having an ongoing series, just to improve your overall comfort.
I think that's a great idea too. The way we handle that is kind of like a twofold way. One is it's great to bring people in for exam relief volunteering, because there is no learning expectation in those activities. They don't have to teach anybody anything. They don't need to know anything. They just need to give out candy or something like that, or like watch students pet a dog. And that's a good gateway into enjoying that interaction and seeing the value in seeing a student. And then when it comes to volunteering for something that they know, we do the other thing where we let them know when we do a call for people that you don't need to know anything. We will train you on absolutely everything you need to know. Whether it's working the tent during orientation or doing our orientation scavenger hunt, we walk them through absolutely everything they'll need to know. And then we also make sure that certain events are staffed with a mix of people. So if they don't know something, they're standing next to somebody else that probably does. And then there's also the second part of, no matter what you know or don't know, you know way more than they do, the students do. So you're not going to break them. And odds are they're going to forget what you told them anyway. So it's totally okay. And I feel like that kind of like tiered approach to getting people that might be a little less comfortable volunteering or joining the team a little more interested in doing so.
We did start using Sign Up Genius this year, and for some of our larger events, they've broken it down by what the duties are and what the time, and the times that they need people. And I have seen, while it's the same group of people, folks seem more comfortable because they get to pick what they do. So if I just really want to just hand out food, I can do that. And if I actually want to really talk to people about something, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And that has helped.
That actually just through a spreadsheet in Google Docs.
Yeah.
We pushed ourselves to 1 o'clock, and that was kind of great. I appreciate it. This is a really good discussion. And I don't want to take too much of anybody else's time. If there is anything else, anybody else had like a dying, pressing need to know or curious of how do you handle something? Danielle, was there anything that you were hoping to learn today?
Now, this is all really great. And that scaffolding kind of material that I think Stephanie was talking about earlier, that sounded really amazing. And yeah, I would love to be able to kind of see what you've mapped out there, because I'm just starting out with kind of our outreach planning and ideas. And as a branch library, trying to figure out where I fit in with our central library and the other branches.
Yeah. So yeah, Stephanie, if you're willing to share that stuff, I'll make sure that it gets out to everybody else that's in the group. Well, awesome. Thanks for joining us. Angie, to your point, or to your question, when can we do this again? The ULS Academic Outreach Committee does these kind of like themed roundtables quarterly. We usually do like, well, maybe it's 3 times a year, or maybe 4 times a year. I can't remember. We do them every couple months. We usually take the summer off, so we'll probably be back in October. And you'll hear about them the way you heard about them this time. And if there's things that you would like us to talk about, you're welcome to shoot us an email. After this event closes, you will get an email from us as well, soliciting some feedback to see how did things go, what can we do to improve them, because these are really about making sure that they're valuable for you as librarians in the field of outreach. So we really appreciate your feedback. So thanks for joining us, and
Thanks,
I will
Chris.
see you next time around.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.